Lloyd Vance's Insider Football is back for another week on 1029 The Game, the Coastal Sports Network. So glad that everybody could join us this evening. We had a little hiatus, but we're back in time for it's about 90 some days until the season starts, and I'm so excited because there's really not a lot to watch. I know everybody's trying to get me to watch basketball. My kids are, and it's just not the same as the NFL. But this evening, I have Nate Vance, our summer intern, is going to be back for another season with us here in Lloyd Vance Insider Football. Nate, how you doing this evening?
I'm doing good. Excited to talk about some football, and only got under 100 days left till the season starts. So it's starting to get exciting.
Yeah, and Nate, so many things to cover. My audience, we haven't been together probably since a little bit after the Super Bowl, but a lot of news and notes to get to around the National Football League. As I always say, the NFL never sleeps, and I wanted to get your opinion on a lot of current news and notes out there, Nate. We'll start with the tush push will live for another season. It went up to a vote. A lot of teams tried to block it, but they did not get the required 24 votes around the National Football League to stop the tush push. And I know Kevin was happy because his Eagles can still use it. But what are you thinking? I know the Bills have used it with some success in the past.
Yeah, I was kind of surprised that it didn't get banned because a lot of these doctors were saying that it was a dangerous play and people could easily get injured on it. And at the end of the day, I didn't think they should take it out of the game because it's something that the Eagles do very well. A couple of other teams do run it themselves, but it's a play that I don't think they should take out because the Eagles have perfected it, and people are just generally mad because the Eagles do it so much and they're so well at it. But I think that if a team is so good at doing one play, people should deal with it or learn how to stop it. So I think it was a good part by the NFL to keep the play around.
Yeah, and a lot of people are saying there was some haterade out there in terms of some of the teams. And I know that Green Bay was one in particular here in Philadelphia. A lot of people called out they wanted the ban, and I think in the end you got to stop it. You know what I mean? Find a way on defense to stop this play. We've seen a lot of innovations around the National Football League in the past, particularly the Wildcat formation. We saw that when it first came out. Miami Dolphins were very successful with it in '07, and then the NFL kind of adjusted. So that's what they're going to have to do around the league. And I do agree with you. I do think eventually, though, I think a lot of the push was from Roger Goodell himself and some of his crony owners. And I think eventually they're going to say, okay, they're going to find a way to ban it. But it's back for another season. I know a lot of Eagles fans are happy about that. The Eagles used to great success, as we said, over 70% of the time they were successful in running that formation. So it's going to be back for another season. And I know your Bills are going to do this as well. Josh Allen likes to run out of that formation too. Nate, got to get your take on the, the draft. We didn't get a chance to talk on air about the draft, but Shador Sanders. A lot of people are saying that different things. The NFL was trying to teach him a lesson, blackball him, etc. What is your take on Shador Sanders, and do you think him going in the fifth round is a big story, not a big story, or where do you kind of fall with it?
No, I think it's a very big story. I think that coming into the draft, I think a lot of people, like myself, predicted that he would be a first round quarterback. He would be taken at some point in the first round. And people didn't generally know where, maybe the Giants or the Saints or the Steelers, but all these teams just kept passing on and passing on. And he lasted all the way to the fifth round. And going to a Browns team that had already taken a quarterback in front of him and Dylan Gabriel in the third round, and they have a bunch of quarterbacks in their quarterback room. They signed Joe Flacco this offseason. They traded for Kenny Pickett, so they have four. They have a QB competition of four guys right now, and none of them are very good. I think Shador Sanders is a very talented player, but I would say the reason for his slide, it would be 50% because of him and 50% because people don't like his dad. I think they're both loud people. I think they love to talk a lot on all these podcasts, and just like to make their voices heard. And I don't think NFL owners like that. I didn't think they wanted to deal with Dion in the background, uh, criticizing them and judging them for every little thing. And then Shador, he wasn't prepared for all of his meetings. A lot of people said for his draft combine meetings. And if you do that and you come in there cocky and arrogant like he did, the NFL owners will show you that they're the ones that run the league, and they'll make you wait and wait and wait. So, and that's what ended up happening. So, it might end up being a blessing, and it might end up ruining his career. So, we're gonna have to figure that out.
Yeah, Nate, and I think there are a variety of things that you pointed out in terms of this situation. It's just not one clear one thing or another, and I do think that they kind of wanted to teach him a lesson in terms of, okay, you're not going to control the narrative around the National Football League. We've seen this in the past with other players like an Antonio Brown, where they were like, okay, we're not going to have all this social media mess um, Dion in some of his interviews before the draft was saying we're going to control the narrative. He's not going certain places. He's just like Eli Manning. Well, Eli Manning was a can't miss first rounder, and when the scouts that I talked to, they said they looked at him and in terms of the tape and him being prepared for his interviews, it just wasn't what it needed to be. So I thought the fifth round was kind of late for him. I still thought he'd get his opportunity at first round, maybe like a Lamar Jackson, last pick of the first round. But once, like I tell everybody, once you're in the league, whether you're drafted, not drafted, you're going to get your opportunity, and that's what Shador's getting now. He's in Cleveland. They gave him number 12, which is typically like a starting quarterback number from back in the day. We'll see how he compares against Joe Flacco and Kenny Pickett. I think maybe the guy on a way out coming over from the Eagles. And Dylan Gabriel, that was kind of the head scratcher. A guy that had been to three schools, had a very bad knee injury, kind of a weak arm. I think he's a coach in waiting, but I didn't think I thought the third round was a little early for him. So Cleveland, very interesting offseason for them, and we'll see how they make out with Shador Sanders. In terms of the offseason, wanted to talk with you about who has had a good off season. We always talk about who won the off season, which I think is kind of a lame award because I've seen in the past where teams look like they were building something great, particularly the Eagles' dream team that I covered in 2012, where they had all the picks and they brought in all this free agencies, and then they had a stinker of a season. So I'll let you get the first swing at this. Who had a good off season in your opinion?
Yeah, I know we heard this a lot about this team last offseason, but I thought the Chicago Bears had another great offseason this year surrounding talent around Caleb Williams. You look in free agency first, what they did. Well, it wasn't really free agency through trade via trades. They trade a second round pick for or a seventh round pick. I'm sorry, for Jonah Jackson, an offensive guard from the Rams. I think he's a high level guy that will bring immediate impact to their offensive line that was not very good last year. And Caleb Williams was taking a million sacks. He led the league in sacks taken. So I think that was a big step in upgrading that offensive line. And then they trade for the All Pro Joe Tooney, another offensive guard from the Chiefs. I think that was another big swing for them, another way to bolster this offensive line. They bring in Ben Johnson, who has been the hottest head coaching candidate name out there for the past couple years. I think that bringing him in to Caleb Williams, who had a down season last year, didn't have the worst season, but definitely didn't live up to his expectations of the first overall pick. I think bringing him in as an offensive mind, I think that they'll be able to bring bigger things to that offense than they did last year with Shane Waldron as their offensive coordinator. And then in the draft, they continue to surround offensive talent around him and taking Colston Loveland in the first round, a tight end from Michigan who is an outstanding prospect. And then in the second round, they take Luther Burden, who's a wide receiver from Missouri, who his sophomore year was one of the best receivers in the country. His junior year got hurt a little bit, so he slid a little bit in the draft, but he was a big pickup for them. I think they're going to do big things this year, this offense with Ben Johnson and Caleb Williams, and yeah, they were my winner for the offseason.
Yeah, and then the Bears are trying to change the narrative. They're trying to change the narrative with the Bears. They had a rough season there with Matt Eberflus and his staff. They just were not getting it done. Ryan Poles, the general manager, is on a hot seat with the McCaskey family. But they decided to give him another chance to build his roster where he wanted. And as you said, to bring in Ben Johnson over, he's hoping to have that Lions mentality to them and that Dan Campbell toughness coming in the door. And Caleb Williams was hit a lot last year, sacked over 50 times, one of the most sacked quarterbacks in the NFL. And you're right, to bring in Jackson, they bring in Thuney. They're trying to fix that offensive line. They already have some pieces there in terms of the receiving uh, group. Um, and then we'll see how they kind of fare on defense because they have some pieces on defense, but they have Sweat and a couple other guys, but they need to pull it together. And it's going to be a fun division to watch because Chicago, they're in there with they have Detroit in there, have Green Bay, always perennial playoff teams, and then in looking at their schedule, they have Dallas in week 3, which could be a tough game. They're at Washington in week 6, at Baltimore week 8, at Cincinnati in week 9. Then they're at the Vikings in week 11. They also play the Eagles in Philadelphia in week 13. And then they finish with a tough group. It looks like, Green Bay week 16, at San Francisco 17, Detroit in 18. So I think that Chicago may have a turnaround this season, and I think that is a good pick for who had a good off season. The team that I wanted to get your take on, and the team that I think had a good offseason. Now, it's interesting because they just had some negative stuff in the news, but I thought the New England Patriots bringing in Mike Vrabel, and they had a ton of free agents that they went after. Matt Hollins, Bradbury at the center position, Morgan Moses, Spillane at the linebacker position. Then they're another team trying to fix their offensive line to bring in Will Campbell, very high out of LSU. And then they bring in Henderson, the rookie from running back from Ohio State. So they brought them in. But Diggs, who they brought in to help that receiving core, he got himself in some hot water in terms of a little boat trip there. I don't know what he was doing on there. They were saying maybe they're going to cut him. Right now, he's still on the roster. But talk to me a little bit of what you think about the Patriots. And am I correct in saying, that Elliott Wolf, their general manager there, and Vrabel, who's their new coach, if they did a good job this offseason?
Sorry about that. Ever since it seems like they got rid of Bill Belichick, they've been taking the right steps in the draft, drafting smarter players. And Bill Belichick, he was a great coach, but he wasn't the greatest drafter. I liked what they did this year in the draft. They took Will Campbell, first pick, to solidify that offensive line. He'll be a great left tackle for years to come. They draft a wide receiver, Kyle Williams, who was an underrated prospect coming into the draft. I think he has big play potential, and he's going to be a big receiver for Drake May. And Drake May, coming off a good rookie season last year, I think that he is put now in a better situation to take that next big step, getting Stephon Diggs, and then that defense making some big splash signings like Milton Williams from the Eagles. I think they did a great job this offseason.
We'll see, because that's a tough division because, you got the Bills there who won that division, I guess, like 5 straight seasons. They're in the mix, but they could actually move up because you have the Jets that are kind of downtrodden. They're really not sure what they're going to do there, and then the Dolphins that they're kind of in flux with Tua and his injuries, and that roster's kind of in rebuilding mode. So interesting times in the AFC East, and we'll see if the Patriots are able to kind of live up to they won the offseason with all those free agents that to sign, like Milton Williams that Nate just referenced there. You're listening to Lloyd Vance's Insider Football on 1029 The Game, the Coastal Sports Network. So glad everybody could join us as we are back from our hiatus. One other team I wanted to point out that did have a good offseason is the Philadelphia Eagles. Yes, they are Super Bowl champions. They had a lot of defections. You have Mekhi Becton out the door, Milton Williams, who we talked about, Josh Sweat going to Arizona, C.J. Gardner Johnson going to Houston. They lost their offensive coordinator, Kellen Moore. But, Howie Roseman, once again, has reloaded. And, you got to say, okay, yeah, they lost some guys, but this roster still is in very good shape in terms of they were able to bring back Dallas Goddard at a reduced contract rate. They still have Jalen Hurts there, Saquon Barkley, bringing over A.J. Dillon from Green Bay. We'll see what he can do. I'm also interested to see what Nolan Smith can do with more playing time. Jalen Carter obviously is there. And then they bring in Jahad Campbell. Could be a steal at the middle linebacker position out of Alabama, a guy who people are saying teams shied away because of his shoulder injury, but I think he could be a good get for the Philadelphia Eagles. And they're kind of reworking this group with those two new coordinators, Kevin Patullo coming over on the offensive side of the ball. He's coming over to replace Kellen Moore. So, what do you think about the Eagles in their offseason?
Yeah, I think the Eagles lost a lot of guys, which happens when you're the Super Bowl champs. A lot of your guys are just going to get paid in the offseason, and they're just going to they got their ring, so now they want their money. So respect to the Eagles for what they did last year. All their great guys on defense, like you mentioned, got paid. I think they did a good job in the draft, getting a couple guys to maybe replace them. And Jahad Campbell, who was an absolute steal. I don't know how the Eagles keep doing this, getting these SEC guys that fall to the end of the first round to them, and they just keep getting these guys over and over again. So props to them. Props to Howie Roseman for being able to pull all this stuff off. The Eagles are in a great position to possibly repeat next year. I think they did enough this off season to keep their core around, and I think they have a shot, like I said, to repeat next year. So I think they did a good job this off season.
Yeah, the Eagles did, and they brought in a quarterback, which is interesting. They traded Kenny Pickett. They bring DTR coming over from the Browns. We'll see how he works out. And speaking of quarterbacks and new places, that this is going to be our next topic up here on Lloyd Vance Insider Football on 102.9 The Game, Coast Sports Network. Um, we're going to talk about like some of these quarterbacks and teams that were needy when they need a quarterback, made a change, and we'll see where they go from here. The New York Giants bring in Russell Wilson. They have Winston that they signed. They bring in Jackson Dart at the end of the first round. Um, Giants, Joe Shane, the general manager, Brian Daboll, the head coach, they are on a hot seat. What do you think about this coaching change for the New York Giants? I mean,
Yeah, it's interesting what they did this offseason because a lot of people saw them having the third pick and thought maybe, oh, they might trade it for Cam Ward, and they weren't able to pull that off. And they thought, oh, they'll just draft Shador Sanders then. And they didn't want Shador Sanders. So they ended up signing Russell Wilson, which Russell Wilson was a decent quarterback last year for the Steelers. I know he wasn't so good at the end of the year, but during the beginning of the year, he showed that he can still win games at a high level and be an efficient quarterback that doesn't turn over the ball, smart, savvy veteran. And then you turn and they sign Jameis Winston, which Jameis Winston is a roller coaster waiting to happen. Everybody knows that. You're going to get big plays. You're going to get some turnovers from him. You really know what Jameis Winston is at this point in his career. And then they draft Jackson Dart at the back of this first round. They trade back into the first round for him. I myself did not see that coming. I didn't think Jackson Dart was a first round quarterback talent. Uh, we'll see what he has. Some people are comparing him to Josh Allen. So hopefully he has that type of ceiling in him, and it's not a terrible draft pick for them.
Yeah, and it's interesting because Russell Wilson, as you said, started out very well for the Steelers, and after he replaced Justin Fields, and then he kind of hit a brick wall going into the end of the season. Yes, they limped into the playoffs, but he still has some ability at age 36. But I just don't know with this Giants roster, other than Malik Neighbors and Tracy at the running back position, you really not a lot there. They're trying to fix that offensive line as they have for a long time. So those quarterbacks, as you pointed out, it may be a tough situation for them. I think Winston eventually may fall, in training camp. They may cut him and keep Tommy DeVito as that third string quarterback and Jackson Dart as the backup. And you talk about Dart, very high prospect coming out of high school, 5-star guy, went to USC and then kind of revived his career at Ole Miss. And as everybody in New York always says, well, we got another quarterback from Ole Miss. Maybe he's another Eli. We'll wait and see on that. Another team with a new quarterback there. You can't talk about quarterbacks without talking about the top of the draft, Cam Ward coming to the Tennessee Titans. I think it's a no brainer. Everybody's like, is he going to start right away? I think he hits the field right away. I heard he's doing good things in OTAs. And let's face it, Will Levis was probably one of the worst stars in NFL last year. How do you think Cam Ward is going to acquiesce with the Tennessee Titans?
Yeah, I think he has a shot to come in and make an immediate impact for this team. Last year, like you said, they had terrible quarterback play from Will Levis with all his terrible decision making. I think he has a chance to come in, and this offense isn't too bad. I mean, their offensive line isn't the best, but it's definitely not the worst. They have a strong run game with Tony Pollard and Tajay Spears. He has a wide receiver one and Calvin Ridley on the outside. Their weapons are kind of on not the best, but Calvin Ridley is still a wide receiver one in this league. So I think he has some talent around him to be able to surprise some people this year and possibly make a run at winning the division. So I think Cam Ward has the potential to be offensive rookie of the year. I know people aren't talking about him much because he went to the Titans and the Titans aren't the mainstream media, but I think he has a shot to do great things there this year.
The next team I definitely got to touch on is we had a surprise retirement just a couple weeks ago. Was Derek Carr? He decides to step away from the NFL. He had a very bad shoulder injury. Some people were saying, yeah, maybe he didn't want to play anymore for the Saints, and the Saints are trying to regroup here. They have Rattler there, who started some games last year, and he didn't play very well. And they have Tyler Shuck, who they took ahead of Shador Sanders in probably the third round or so. So Shuck is in the mix, and then they have Hayner, who's just looks like a backup to me. So the Saints, I think they're in for a very long season. Mickey Loomis is there. Their general manager been there for a long time. Gail Benson has always given him a lot of leeway, and then you start wondering about Kellen Moore coming there and the scheme that he's running. But is Spencer Rattler the guy? Is it going to be Tyler Shuck? What are we looking at with the Saints?
Yeah, I think Spencer Rattler should be the starter to start out with. They did invest high draft capital in Tyler Shuck, but I just got to say that was one of the dumbest draft picks I've ever seen. Drafting a fifth year quarterback that didn't really show much in college and just drafting him because he's has mobile upside and stuff. It just felt like a stupid pick kind of for the Saints. I don't think he's going to be very good. So I think Spencer Rattler will be the starter, but like I said, they invested high draft capital into Tyler Shuck, so he will start eventually at some point this season. And I think the Saints are in position to possibly draft Arch Manning next year. So I think that's what they should be looking forward to next year because this year is not going to be too well for them.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with you. And that Shuck was kind of a head scratcher. We'll see how he makes out. And the Saints, let's face it, they are probably planning for the future, even though they're in the NFC South, which is kind of one of the weaker divisions. I just don't see much coming out of Tyler Shuck going there, and there's a lot of change in the winds with that Saints team, and Kamar's getting a little bit older. You wonder how much they have left. Chris Olave coming off all those concussions problems. It's going to be an interesting season for the Saints, but I do agree with you that their quarterback position it's ugly, and it may be, you know, Arch Manning time, and you kind of can't blame them reaching in this draft because the draft was kind of weak in terms of the quarterbacks. None of these quarterbacks were head and shoulders above each other. And yeah, Cam Ward probably was the top guy, but all the guys underneath of him, they kind of were, to me, they were kind of about the same and average to mediocre. So we'll see how Shuck makes out. But as you said, yeah, a long college career where he was at a lot of schools. He's an overrated prospect, and you just wonder how much he's bringing to the table in the NFL. Another team we're going to talk about in terms as a new quarterback, and they have a new regime in there, is the New York Jets. They have Justin Fields coming over from the Steelers, and you have Tyrod Taylor there, and they have a new head coach in Aaron Glenn. They're trying to change everything with them. And what do you think about the Jets?
Yeah, I think Justin Fields is a capable starter in this league. I think he hasn't shown his full potential yet, so hopefully the Jets are able to unlock that from him. I think with the Steelers last year, he was just asked to not turn the ball over, so he didn't get to see his full talent on display last year. I think he's a really good dual threat quarterback. I think the Jets have a really good defense. I thought they brought in a smart head coach in Aaron Glenn, who's going to try and build that philosophy like Dan Campbell did over there in Detroit when he was the defensive coordinator. Um, they have talent. They have talent on this team. I mean, we heard about it all offseason, but you won't hear about it this offseason because now they have Justin Fields. But I think Justin Fields could maybe surprise some people and maybe turn into the starter that we always thought he could be when he was drafted 10th overall a couple years ago. So I'm excited to see what he can do this year.
Yeah, Justin Fields is going to be interesting because he's a dynamic player. He has the ability to run for over 1,000 yards and very strong arm. We saw that at Georgia. We saw that at Ohio State. So he's going to get his opportunity there. Aaron Glenn is going to craft a playbook around him, and um, a lot of people are saying he already has a rapport with Garrett Wilson, his college teammate. He has Brees Hall there at the running back position, and they're getting away a lot of the mess and that we're going to talk about in a minute with another guy. Um, but let's touch on the Las Vegas Raiders. Some people are saying they had a good off season. Pete Carroll's coming in there. They trade for Geno Smith. He's there, and they have Aiden O'Connell. Are the Raiders on the rise, or are some people already talk about too much?
No, I thought they had a great offseason. They were going to be my second team if I didn't talk about the Bears. I thought they had a great offseason. I think when you bring in a new coach like Pete Carroll, who's a proven winning head coach, I know he's older, but for the short term, he's going to be a good coach for them and he's going to win them games. He showed that in Seattle, he showed that at USC. So I think that was a good hire for them. And then they bring in Geno Smith, which the quarterback market this offseason wasn't very good. I mean, Sam Darnold was the top option. So, and I guess they didn't really want Sam Darnold or he wanted too much money from them. So they swung a trade from the Seahawks. They gave up a third round pick for Geno, which Geno's an underrated quarterback in this league. He played behind a terrible offensive line in Seattle, and I think he's above average starter in this league. So only having to give up a third round pick for him, I thought that was really good. And then, in my opinion, they got the best player in the draft in Ashton Genty. The best college running back that I've seen in my time personally, rushing for over 2,000 yards in college. He was just a game changer, picking him up. And then they drafted a receiver I really liked out of TCU, Jack Beck. I thought he definitely was a first round talent, and he slid to them in the second round. He's one of the best route runners and has really good run after the catch ability. So I thought they had a really good offseason bringing in all this stuff and just a new regime from last year where it just seemed like they just didn't have anything going for them besides Brock Bowers. So I'm excited to see what they can do this year.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting this to see what the Raiders can do, and yeah, I think Gino will be a good fit there. Pete Carroll has that. He knows him, and they have an opportunity. Obviously, that we know the Chargers are kind of they're in flux. They made the playoffs last year, but they're not firmly hold of that second spot in the AFC West, and then we know the Chiefs are in charge there. So um, let's continue with more of these quarterback carousel here. What are we thinking in terms of the Seattle Seahawks? Darnold's going there, as you said. He's coming in. McDonald's the head coach, and he's trying to find some rhythm there with that offense. And you have Lock there, and then they draft Jalen Milrow. Milrow could be one of the best athletes coming out of the draft, whether it was any position. So, what do you think about Seattle and their quarterback situation?
Yeah, I thought that signing Sam Darnold was kind of a lateral move going from him to Geno Smith. I think they're right around the same tier of quarterbacks. And if you looked at Sam Darnold through his career, he had a really good stop in Minnesota, but in his other two stops with the Jets and the Carolina Panthers, he wasn't very good. And the common denominator with all that was that he had terrible offensive lines for every single team he played for. He's going to a Seattle team that has a top five bottom O line, one of the top five worst O lines in the league. So he's going to be under duress again. I'm not very optimistic that he's going to be able to do what he did last year in Minnesota, going from one of the best offensive play callers in the league to where he is now. I think that he's going to struggle a little bit more this year. I don't think he's going to be completely terrible like the worst quarterback in the league, but I think we're definitely going to see some regression out of Sam Darnold, and then they kind of make some lateral moves. They lose DK. They bring in Cooper Kupp, who's older now, and you saw the Rams just didn't want to pay him anymore, just didn't want him at all. So they just got rid of him. And so, yeah, I think it's going to be interesting to see what happens with Sam Darnold, to say the least, this year.
Yeah, and Seattle's an interesting one because they're kind of retooling on the fly, and they just missed the playoffs last year. They had 10 wins. But I do agree with you that bringing in Darnold may have just been kind of a lateral move for him. And Darnold was so bad in the playoffs. We all know this. I mean, he was terrible in that playoff loss to the Vikings. They won a ton of regular season games, and the Vikings, they said it all by just saying, all right, Darnold, take a walk. And they're going to go with J.J. McCarthy there, coming off the bad knee injury. But Nate, the biggest elephant in the room in terms of the quarterback carousel is the Pittsburgh Steelers. So, they have Mason Rudolph there. They drafted Will Howard, who we're familiar with from the Chestnut, where we're from. Um, but the thing is, Aaron Rodgers is just making him wait, and I think they put all their eggs in Aaron Rodgers' basket. I did talk to somebody. They said that Aaron Rodgers is probably going to come in when they have full squad OTAs in a couple weeks, but I just think it's a recipe for disaster. Aaron Rodgers is 41, will be 42 in December. The Jets decided he was not the answer after 2 seasons, and has he have anything left? And what do you think is going to happen with the Steelers? If they are they going to sign him? Not where are they going to go?
I think they will end up signing him. I don't think they have any other choice. I think Mason Rudolph, he would be one of the worst starting quarterbacks in the league if he did roll out there as a starter. And Will Howard, he's just a rookie. He was a sixth round pick, so no one really expects him to do much. Maybe he can turn into something later in his career. But if you look at the Steelers, their offensive depth is just below average. If you look around the league, they brought in DK Metcalf, which was a good move, I thought, for them, adding a receiver next to George Pickens. But then they went and traded George Pickens to the Cowboys, so you kind of went lateral there. And then they don't have particularly one of the best O lines in the league. They lost their left tackle, who was decent last year, to the Titans. And then they lose Najee Harris as well to the Chargers. But they do bring in a rookie running back that I like, and Caleb Johnson from Iowa, who's a big play guy for them. And so I don't think this offense is particularly very well. So I think Aaron Rodgers might struggle with them. And there were some reports that Rodgers was waiting to see if the Vikings maybe didn't like what they saw from J.J. McCarthy. I think if that happens, I think Rodgers should go to the Vikings. But if this is his only chance and he wants to keep playing ball, then he really has no other choice. So
Yeah, and the thing is with Tomlin and Omar Khan, who's their general manager, the Rooney families that own the team, they're not going to wait for so long for Aaron Rodgers. This is a stoic organization. I know people that worked within their front office, and they have a Steeler way about themselves. It's not about one player; it's about the team. So Rogers better figure out what he's doing, whether he's in a cave, putting his patchouli on or whatever, eating mushrooms. You know him. Who knows what he's doing, but he needs to figure it out. And the Steelers, they're actually excited for him. I just think at his age and coming off a season where his numbers were okay, 3,897 yards, 28 touchdowns, 11 interceptions, but there was no breakout game. I was kind of saying, okay, what was his best performance? You probably say it was in week 15 against Jacksonville, where he had 3 TDs, but he only completed about 50% of his passes there. And there were so many games where he just couldn't move, and you saw that Achilles injury kind of hurt him. So we'll see where Rodgers goes from there. Wanted to get your take on, a lot of people are saying if they don't go with Rodgers, maybe they hit up the Atlanta Falcons and Kirk Cousins. What a crazy situation here. You got a 4-year deal for 180 million, 100 million of that guaranteed last season, but obviously they draft Penix in the first round, and Penix took over late in the season after Cousins struggled with very bad interceptions. But the Falcons did pay Cousins a $10 million signing bonus, roster bonus on March 17th. So that's sunk money. So what do you think is going to happen with Kirk Cousins? Is he just going to be a backup, or are the Falcons going to cut him?
yeah, I think he's just going to be a backup for now. I think if we see a quarterback go down during the season, like a team maybe that's has aspirations of making the playoffs and their quarterback goes down, maybe we see Kirk Cousins get traded. But I don't see what the Atlanta Falcons do here because their owner paid him all this money and he's just doesn't want to he doesn't want to cut him because he feels like that's not worth his investment, so he wants to keep him around and no team really wants to trade for that contract, so they're kind of just stuck with him for right now. Maybe, like I was saying, if a playoff caliber team loses their starting quarterback to injury and maybe they're able to trade him then, but I don't the way Kirk Cousins played last year, he looked washed coming off the Achilles injury, so I don't see any team willingly going out there trying to trade for this big contract when he's just not very good of a quarterback anymore.
Yes, I think Nate, you're kind of right there. I think they're stuck with him because let's face it, they gave him that contract and then they inexplicably draft Penix Jr. in the first round, and then they have this whole quarterback struggle here, and that was a lot of money to give Kirk Cousins, a lot of it guaranteed. So we'll see how um, Raheem Moore and Fontenot, the general manager down there, and Arthur Blank, the owner, how they work that out. But I think at this point, Kirk Cousins will be probably the highest paid backup in NFL history, and they'll just kind of see how it goes around a trade deadline. So we'll see with that one. The last quarterback I wanted to talk about here on Lloyd Vance's Insider Football on 1029 The Game, Coast Sports Network. Thank you for joining us. Myself and Nate Vance, our summer intern, he's back from college, is Brock Purdy. He gets an extension. He's now going to be paid over $50 million per season. I thought that was a lot of money for him, but it's a going rate for quarterbacks out there. I wanted to see if you thought he was good enough. The extension's 5 years, 265 million, 181 million guarantee for Brock Purdy, the former last player in the draft a couple years ago.
Yeah, I thought he earned his money, rightfully so. Like you said, that's the going rate for a quarterback nowadays. They're all just trying to one up each other. I don't do I generally think he's the should be the seventh highest paid quarterback or player in the league? No, but that's just the going rate for quarterbacks nowadays. Like there's guys like Trevor Lawrence who hasn't showed the ability to do anything in the NFL that make more money than him and just live off the hype of a first overall pick. So I didn't think it was that terrible as people are overstating it. He's a good quarterback. He's been to Pro Bowls. He's done everything anybody's asked for him. So he got his money, and I thought he deserved it. Is he the seventh best quarterback in the league? No, but that's just how the NFL is nowadays, and people are just going to have to deal with it.
Yeah, an interesting offseason for the Niners. They get rid of Debo Samuel. They send him to Washington and a bunch of other moves that they made in terms of just clearing that roster out, including guys like Dre Greenlaw, who's good now with the Denver Broncos. They did give Fred Warner a contract, kept him around. Were able to keep Trent Williams. It's going to be interesting to see if Christian McCaffrey is able to come back from his injury-riddled season from last season. But I do agree with you. Purdy, that's just going great. And hey, you can't tell the York family how to spend their money. It's their money, but not many good quarterbacks out there. We'll see if he's able to live up to that contract. We're going to kind of segue here on Lloyd Vance's Insider Football on 1029 The Game, the Coast Sports Network. Nate wanted to get your take on what coaches are on the hot seat. I know it's very early, but you almost kind of can feel it when a coach is on a hot seat going into the season. And like we talked about Eberflus last year, and it coming to fruition. Dennis Allen down with the Saints, he kind of struggled going into the season, and then they pulled the trigger on getting rid of him. So, what coaches do you think are on a hot seat? I'll throw a couple out there. I knew you and I talked about this off the air. I think the Arizona Cardinals, there's high expectations on Jonathan Gannon. He has had two losing seasons. Going into that pivotal third season, I'd say the pressure's on him. Osen Fort, the general manager there, is probably going to want to see results. So, what coaches do you agree with me on the Cardinals? Gannon being on a hot seat, and what other coaches do you think are on a hot seat?
Yeah, I think Gannon is on the hot seat, but I think he's done a good job rebuilding this Cardinals team. If you looked at it when he took this job, they had the worst roster in the NFL. Kyler Murray had just tore his ACL, and they were projected to have the first overall pick, and he squeezed 4 wins out of them. And then you look last year, they were in first place halfway through the year, and just Kyler Murray just I think it was more Kyler Murray's fault just not living up to what people expect from him, and they lose the division, but they're still an 8-9 team. I think Jonathan Gannon is definitely on the hot seat this year. I think they do need to win double-digit games this year, but I think he's been doing a good job. I think the coach that's on the hot seat the most is definitely Brian Dable for the Giants. I think that uh, the owners of the team said it themselves that he's got one more year, and if they don't see the results that they like, um, then him and the GM are going to get canned. So I think I I think he's in a bad position because they have the hardest strength of schedule in the NFL. Who knows how the Giants have the hardest strength of schedule? I think this is going to be the last we see of Brian Daboll and Joe Shane and a New York Giants this year.
Yeah, and Nate, you know what? I'm afraid you may be right. I know Rich Quinones, who I talk to a lot, he on his show. He's a Giants guy, and I tell him all the time. I was like, Joe Shane is in trouble. It's the ghost of Saquon Barkley. Saquon put the mojo on his team. He left. He helped the Philadelphia Eagles win the Super Bowl championship, and they were all crying in their beer with the Giants. And yes, I thought they did a pretty good job in the draft, and they get Carter on the defensive line. Their defensive line is going to be very nasty, but I just don't know if it's enough. When we talked about their quarterback situation earlier, I think that Joe Shane, the general manager, as well as Brian Dable, they are on one of the hottest seats in the National Football League. I also throw in Shane Steichen. And, he's attached it to hip with Gannon. They both had success with the Eagles in 2017. He got the opportunity with the Colts. The Colts have just been an underachieving bunch. Particularly, they've thrown all their eggs behind Anthony Richardson, who has struggled in terms of his passing. And I'm just not sure should have been a first round pick. So, do you agree with the Shane Steichen as well?
Yeah, Shane Steichen. I like Jonathan Gannon. I don't think he's a bad coach, but when you draft a quarterback, he wanted Anthony Richardson as his quarterback, and Anthony Richardson's been one of the worst starting quarterbacks in the NFL over these past couple of years. And when you put your eggs into that basket, people need to see results, and this is going to be the third season now. So I don't think he has much time left, like you were saying. If they don't make the playoffs again this year, he's probably a goner.
Yeah, and I'll throw one more in there in terms of the coach. And this is always one of the hot seats in the NFL. The Cleveland Browns, Kevin Seifert, they're just a mess. Andrew Barry's a general manager. Barry learned under Howie Roseman with the Philadelphia Eagles, has a good reputation, but they've had so many head scratching moves with the Browns, and even Jimmy Haslam, their owner, he's made some mistakes as well. So the Browns are an ugly situation, and you may see Seifert kind of in trouble as well. So.
Yeah, I got one more team for you, the
Sure.
Tennessee Titans with Brian Callahan. I think last year he came in with high expectations. They spent the most money in free agency, and they were 3-14, so first overall pick this year. So I think if he has another bad year after now getting the first overall pick and having the highest free agent free agency class 2 years ago, I think he's going to be a goner as well. So yeah.
Hey, that's a good pick, and because last year they got rid of Rand Carthon, the general manager, after one season, and Carthon brought in Callahan, so it's going to be interesting to see if Amy Adams Strunk, who owns the team, what direction she wants to go. But the Titans, there's nowhere to go but up, and Callahan may not be the guy, and we've seen it around the NFL where coaches, you know, are fired after less than 2 seasons. So I definitely put Callahan on the hot seat. Speaking of coaches, Nate, I wanted to get your take on this one. He's not on a hot seat, and I had to give him his flowers. I have always said, at first this guy may have had some buffoonery about him and theatrics, etc. But the Philadelphia Eagles give Nick Sirianni, their 43-year-old Super Bowl winning head coach, a new contract, one of the highest in the NFL. They didn't release the terms of the deal, but I'm hearing it's a nice, sweet deal for Nick Sirianni. Did he earn it? And can now people kind of look past and put to bed, the theatrics, like when he was yelling at the fans after the win against the Cleveland Browns?
Yeah, I think that the Super Bowl just validated him as a coach. He has the second highest winning percentage since he's became the head coach for the Eagles. Eagles only behind Andy Reid. All he does is win. People may not like him and think he acts like a child sometimes and thinks he's too immature to be representing your organization as a National Football League head coach. But all the guy does is win. He has a winning mindset. He's established a winning culture in Philly. So I think he's rightfully deserved of all that money. And look, the Eagles are riding high after their Super Bowl. Everybody's getting paid. Everybody's getting big money. Uh, you see Saquon's now the Madden cover, all this stuff. So they're gonna have to repeat this again next year.
And we know how difficult it is for teams to repeat. I mean, the Chiefs just did it a couple years ago, back to back, and they were trying for the three-peat against the Eagles, and everything fell apart in the Super Bowl. And it's just so hard to keep a core group together. The Eagles, as we said, they've had a lot of defections in offseason. Milt Williams, Sweat, and some other pieces. But Harry Roseman has, he's done a very good job in terms of the draft and rebuilding this roster. I think that the Eagles definitely in the driver's seat in the NFC East, but as you said, you got to tip your cap to Sirianni in terms of how great this team is now. I heard on the radio people saying, "All right, he's a Hall of Famer, etc." Hold on, pump the brakes on all that. Okay, he he's had two Super Bowls, one win. He won one of them. We give him his props in terms of being an Eagles great coach, but he's still got a little bit before he jumps into that upper echelon in terms of the NFL history. But uh, he gets his contract. He's the guy of the future, and uh, Nate hit on a good segue there when it jumped to this one. The Madden cover, Saquon Barkley, I knew it was coming. He was jumping backwards over somebody, the play of the year last year. He's on the Madden cover, but I wanted to get Nate's take on this. I covered Don McNabb in '05 when he was on the Madden cover, and there was a jinx. Let me tell you, he got hurt very badly the next season. I think he had a sports hernia or something like that, got hurt, and the season was just one disaster. So, talk a little bit about Saquon being on the cover of the Madden. Is there a jinx and what it used to be, Nate?
Uh, so I'll answer this in three parts. I don't think the jinx is real, but if you look at it, Christian McCaffrey got the cover last year, and he had his Achilles tendonitis and then blew out his Achilles. So it's definitely not a good thing if the curse is real, because it might be coming for Saquon, who's already gotten injured a couple times in his career. So that might not be a good thing for him. Madden as a game it's still terrible. I play it sometimes with my friends, but NCAA is the new big thing. I think NCAA is a way better game than Madden. I think Madden has a couple things to learn from them and maybe tweak their game a little bit. And I think Saquon should be happy that he's the Madden cover. It was well deserved. He had one, in my opinion, the greatest running back season of all time, if you look at it. And I think it was well deserved from Saquon. And the cover that they actually used is probably one of the best covers ever of him hurling the guy backwards. So
And it's exciting for him and Eagles fans for him to be on the cover of that. And as you said, Madden it's still very popular, but I think it's kind of lagging in terms of the younger generation, in terms of some of the shoot 'em up games, and you talk about 2K and all the other things. But exciting times for Saquon to be on there, and we're here on Lloyd Vance's Insider Football on 102.9 The Game, the Coast Sports Network, coming down the stretch here. A big topic is around the Olympics in 2028. They've decided, okay, one of the sports they're allowing is flag football, which is American flag football. And the 2028 Olympics are in LA, so everybody's excited. And the NFL has said that they can put players out there if they want to play, kind of a la the dream team. They better not lose. That's all I gotta say. And then the player, USA quarterback, Daryl Doucette, 5'8", 140 guy who's 35 years old. He said, "Man, I'm good enough to play. I'm better than these NFL guys." So, what's your take on flag football? And does Doucette have a chance?
yeah, first off, that Daryl Doucette guy, he's an idiot. He would have no chance competing with these NFL guys. I put a Lamar Jackson or a Jaden Daniels at his spot. I would get much more production out of him. So that guy, he would have no shots playing it. But if I was just building a team, if you got to look at it like this, it's going to be in 3 years. So you would have to add 3 years on to everybody's age. But I think if I had to roll out a team, like I think they said it was going to be it'd be five on five, I think, or would it be 6 on 6 or 7 on 7?
Yeah, I think it's something like that, 7 on 7, and
Yeah. So
but you
so
talk about the athletes, come
yeah,
on.
I don't think anyone would be able to stand a chance against us. If I was picking my team, though, I would probably pick Jaden Daniels as my quarterback, and then I'd run out a lineup of Bijan probably, and then if I had two receivers, I'd pick Jamar and Justin Jefferson, and then they said the center can snap the ball and run routes, so I'd probably pick a tight end for that. So I'd probably pick Brock Bowers. So that would probably be my offense. I don't know who you would go with for your five, but
Yeah, that's ridiculous.
yeah,
They better beat everybody. You know what I mean? I can't think of like Sweden or one of these countries that doesn't even really play American football, putting a roster together. This may be like when the Dream Team played, and it's just laughers, winning by 50 points or so. And I agree with you. Look, it's great that these guys have had some kind of career playing flag football. I can't imagine this their full time job. But they've had a career in it. But the NFL guys, if they can get it out there, the way they can market the game, there's going to be 7 international games next season, counting the game of Brazil, and I think it'd be a good seller for the National Football League. So that's going to be something fun to watch in terms of going into next season. As we come down the home stretch, wanted to a big thing, Nate, was the schedule release. Were you excited for it? I mean, and are there any games that you kind of circled?
yeah. I always like seeing the schedule release. I know we already know the games beforehand, but it's nice to see like what order they go in. You can look at your favorite team and see, oh, this week we're gonna have a hard game, or this week it's gonna be an easier week. But there's a couple games. I mean, if you just look at week one, you have a rematch of my team, the Bills, and the Ravens. I think that's going to be an excellent game the first week of the season. Um, I think that's going to be a big time game. I think they did a good job with the Thanksgiving games this year. You have the Packers and the Lions, and then you have the Chiefs and the Cowboys, and then the night game is going to be the Bengals and Ravens going at it. So those I think are going to be all excellent games. The Christmas games this year should be better. Um, you got the Lions and the Vikings playing then. So I think the NFL did a generally. I think they did a better job putting marquee games and bigger spotlights this year because they had teams last year like how many times did the Jets play on primetime football and how many times did the Dolphins and all these teams that were just terrible like had uh, big high hopes last year and they were just terrible on in these big games on these big marquee games. So I think they did a better job putting solidified teams in these spots.
Yeah, I agree with you that the schedule release is exciting, and we know that the NFL, they're trying to maximize their money and the crowds out there. They had over 200,000 people in Green Bay for the draft. Everything is a rolling cavalcade now and events and this is another thing they can put on program and you see even though it's baseball season, the NBA playoffs, that the NFL still moves the needle and the schedule release, you talk about some of the games, and there's a few that I circled on the calendar. Obviously, the Dallas Cowboys are at the Philadelphia Eagles week one. That's September 4th. That's the date we have circled. Obviously, we're 90 some days away from that. That's a Thursday game. That's going to be on Peacock. And the Eagles are going to raise their banner and hopefully beat the hated Cowboys. And I know their fans are like, all right, you got to stick it to them because I thought maybe they may go with maybe a higher marquee game, maybe Jaden Daniels in Washington in that spot. But that's a game I'm looking forward to. Speaking of Jaden Daniels, you have Chicago at Washington in week 6. That's a rematch of the Hail Mary game that we saw was so exciting and kind of killed the Bears season when Jane Daniels hit that play. That's a Monday night football game. Um,
Bills and Chiefs is always a good one.
yeah, the Bills and Chiefs. I'm looking forward to that one. You have Detroit going to Philadelphia in Week 11. That's going to be a fun game. That's a Sunday afternoon game. That's a Sunday night football game, 8:20 NBC. And then you have a rematch of the Super Bowl. The Philadelphia is at Kansas City in Week 2. I was hoping that game would be a little later in the season, but that's going to be on a Sunday, September 14th. That's a 4:25 game. That'll be the national game on Fox. So there are a couple of the games that I'm really looking forward to. Uh, the Super Bowl this year is going to be in San Francisco, Super Bowl 60, and it's going to be February 8th. So, the fun part now is just planning out the calendar. I talked to a couple of my buddies. They're big on road trips and all that stuff. So now they know where they're going for their trips and get it together. But yeah, as you said, you already know who they're playing, but it's fun to see when it's all laid out in front of you, and it's like a kid at Christmas. We're here at Lloyd Vance's Insider Football on 1029, the Game of Coast Sports Network. Um, Want to talk about top teams, Nate. Right now, in terms of the betting, I was looking today. The Eagles are plus 650, so they're the highest. Then you have your Bills at plus 750 in the second spot. Baltimore Ravens at plus 750 as well. Kansas City's plus 800. And then you have Detroit Lions at plus 1,000. So talk about these top teams. Is there anybody I'm missing?
Yeah, just going down team by team, the Eagles are the champs, so they rightfully deserve to be up there. I think the Chiefs should deserve to be second. Everybody tries to write them off every single year, but they're going to continue to be good every single year. They're at least going to be. They've showed in the Mahomes era that at worst they're going to be in the AFC Championship game. So I think that's a little bit disrespectful to what they've done, what they've accomplished over the past couple of years. I think the Bills and Ravens. I think they should be 3-4 interchangeable. That game was so close last year; it came down to a drop pass. I think those two teams are interchangeable. Like I said, I think they deserve to be 3-4, and then you got a couple teams. I don't think the Lions should necessarily be at 5, but I don't hate them for putting them there. I think me personally, I would probably put the Commanders up there as my fifth team. I think what Jaden Daniels did as a rookie last year was special, and I think it's going to continue this year. And I thought they made a lot of necessary steps in the offseason to keep building around him. So I think they would be my fifth team, and also maybe the LA Rams as well could be my fifth spot as well. I thought they gave the Eagles their best run for their money last year, and I thought adding another weapon in Devontae Adams was really big for them. So those would be the only two teams I would put over Detroit, but I think the top five was pretty good.
Yeah, I thought for the most part that they had the teams correct. We know in the NFL that there's going to be four new teams every season, and last season was kind of the Commanders jumping out of nowhere, and they jumped in the mix, and then they were the big story of the season. There's going to be somebody else that jumps out there, maybe worse to first, but I do think those teams are good, solid picks, and particularly I got it. You wonder about the Baltimore Ravens. Been to the playoffs 6 of the last 7 seasons. Is it time to panic on Lamar Jackson? Is he, he's a two-time MVP, but do you think he can get over the hump?
Yeah, I definitely do. I think Lamar Jackson is one of the best quarterback talents that we've seen in in my lifetime for sure. I don't know. You can say the same thing for you, but I think he's one of the best players I've seen play on a football field. He's been to the AFC Championship now once, and he's been to the division round now 3 or 4 times. So he keeps getting there. I think eventually he'll get over the hump. And these playoff narratives that he just sucks in the playoffs and is a playoff choker, I think they'll start to disappear soon enough. But he's just got to wait his turn because Mahomes is on a legacy run right now. So him and Josh Allen, they just got to wait patiently, and I think both of them will eventually get their Super Bowl that they've been waiting for.
It's going to be interesting with Baltimore because they always seem to have good drafts. That they're trying to work on fixing that defense, and I think if he can get some help around him, particularly at the wide receiver position, get some health there. That yeah, definitely Lamar Jackson will still be in the mix. Obviously, as Derrick Henry, they gave him that contract. Derrick Henry is back. Yes, he's 31, almost 32. But I think he's just a sledgehammer. They're trying to fix that offensive line as well. In terms of the MVPs, if we talk about Lamar Jackson, he's at plus 50 and 550 according to DraftKings, so he's number one. Josh Allen at plus 550 is tied with him at the top. Then you have Joe Burrow, who had such a great season last season at plus 650. Joe Burrow, he led the NFL in terms of yards, 49, 18, almost got to 5,000, 43 touchdowns, 9 interceptions. They're a team I want to kind of talk about. And then we have Patrick Mahomes at plus 700. And then Jaden Daniels plus 750. He was offensive rookie of the year. Is he going to have, CJ Stroud kind of struggled after winning that award, but talk about those candidates in particularly Burrow, Daniels, and Mahomes, and your guy Josh Allen.
Yeah, I think all those guys respectfully have their own shot to win MVP this year. But my pick would definitely be Jaden Daniels this year. I think what we saw from him last year wasn't a fluke. I think he's the next up and coming quarterback. He's going to solidify himself as a top five quarterback in this NFL. What he can do, not only throwing the ball, being one of the most accurate quarterbacks in the NFL at such a young age, but also being one of the best running quarterbacks that we've seen in the NFL. So I think with that set of skills, I think he has a real shot to bring home the MVP this year to the Commanders, as they haven't had an MVP, and I don't have they ever had the Washington franchise, have they ever had an MVP?
And you're going to be like, are you serious? I believe their last MVP was a kicker, Mark Mosley, and he was a straight on kicker. He was a toe kicker, and he won the MVP. And that's how long back we're talking. But they've had some successful teams, obviously under Joe Gibbs, and including Doug Williams, Mark Rippon, and Joe Theismann. They all won Super Bowls, but yeah, they haven't had a lot of MVPs with that Washington franchise. So, but Jaden Daniels, if Saquon wasn't the cover guy, I would have picked him to be the cover guy of Madden, because he seems to be the new face in the NFL, and he definitely does have a very good shot. They rebuilt that offensive line, and wanted to kind of get your take on this. We'll talk about the trades around the NFL. You touched on some of these, but Laramie Tunsil goes over from Houston over to Washington to fix that offensive line that's just been kind of disarray since Trent Williams left. Talk a little about these trades in terms of, we touched on some of these earlier, but like George Pickens, DK Metcalf. They also bringing over Deebo Samuel coming from San Francisco to Washington. But talk about the trades, and trades going to be something more that we see in the NFL. We saw a lot of it. We see a lot of it in the NBA.
Yeah, I'll just go trade by trade. But the Laramie Tunsil trade, I thought it was a big win for the Commanders, getting the left tackle that is one of the best in the league. For the Texans, I don't know what they're doing. That was their best offensive lineman, and they had a terrible O line last year. You saw C.J. Stroud getting killed in that playoff game against the Chiefs, and they just went and upped and traded their best offensive lineman. So I don't really know what the Texans are doing, and I'm genuinely sorry for C.J. Stroud. But for Jaden Daniels, that's a huge get for him. George Pickens to Dallas, I thought that was a necessity that they needed, adding another element to their offense. So I think that was a big get for them. Deebo Samuel to the Commanders, I thought that was another nice get for the Commanders. A little chess piece that Cliff Kingsbury can use in his offense. I think Cliff Kingsbury is going to use him well, just like Kyle Shanahan did. And then DK Metcalf to the Steelers.
Yeah,
I like the trade when they had George Pickens. I thought they would be a really good dynamic duo, but they gave DK Metcalf a lot of money, and you have been seeing over the past couple of years that he wasn't able to produce in Seattle, and JSN overtook him as the number one receiver in that offense. So I didn't really like that trade too much, but I understand why they were doing it. So all in all, I thought the trades this offseason were pretty good.
yeah, and I thought overall that you're seeing more and more of these younger general managers like Harry Roseman and some of the younger guys out there are Ballard with the Colts and they're willing to make trades. In the past, you saw these old crusty guys that they kind of were like, no, I'm holding on to somebody. We're not trading him. We're not leaving. Um, you know, we talk about in terms of one of the teams you touched on there. George Pickens goes to the Dallas Cowboys. We have seven new head coaches in NFL, and we'll go through them all one on one. But in terms of the Dallas Cowboys, I still don't know what Jerry Jones is doing. And he kind of he's a general manager, he's an owner. His son, I know, is trying to reel him in, but it's just not possible. They decided to go Brian Schottenheimer, who was their offense coordinator for one season, the son of Marty Schottenheimer. That's what he's most famous for, as their new head coach, and they kicked Mike McCarthy out the door. That cannot inspire Dallas fans. So, what are you thinking in terms of the Dallas Cowboys and their new head coach selection?
Yeah, I don't think anybody saw the Schottenheimer job coming. I don't think anybody assumed that he would get the job. A lot of people were saying Deion Sanders was going to get the job, and that was bringing a lot of buzz back to the team because the Cowboys just haven't been. Last year they weren't very interesting with Mike McCarthy, and they haven't been generally interesting in a while. And getting Deion Sanders would have brought a lot of buzz to that team, but they ended up going with Brian Schottenheimer. So who knows how he's going to do? I mean, no one can really say, but it didn't seem like he was the most ideal candidate for them. And just the Cowboys as a whole team, I think they have a lot of top end talent, but they need to keep filling out their roster over the next couple of these years. But if I had to guess for this year, I would say that they're probably going to end up finishing third in this division.
Yeah, I think they're going to struggle, and they have to pay Micah Parsons as well, and they gave Dak Prescott the largest contract in the history of the NFL. He's $63 million a year player, and that's kind of hamstrung this organization. But Dallas is going to be Dallas. I know Kevin's not on. I know Kevin loves to smile and say, well, keep Jerry Jones around forever because as an Eagles fan, he's real happy because Jerry Jones just doesn't know what he's doing. They're just a rudderless ship with the Dallas Cowboys. And they won so much in the 90s. And in my lifetime, I, I'm not going to cry for them. So, one of the then if we can go through some of these new head coaches. There's seven of them, and you can kind of give your take on them. How about Liam Cohen? He's going with the Jacksonville Jaguars. Are you going to be able to turn that team around? I know they put a lot behind Trevor Lawrence. Is Liam Cohen going to be able to change the situation with the Jags?
I think he was a really good offensive mind for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers last year. I think he'll be able to maybe rework Trevor Lawrence as he hasn't been able to live up to his uh, draft draft grade from a couple years as the first overall pick. I think that I think that he'll be able to do a lot with this offense. Getting a guy like Travis Hunter, they traded up to get him. He's going to be able to play both sides of the ball for them as a corner and a receiver. So I think, and that's a winnable division. So I think he'll definitely be able to make some noise this year and possibly win the division.
And it's a winnable division. That was a good point that you made there because let's face it, that's one of those divisions where it's kind of even, and all of them you're like, all right, um, like the NFC South, anybody could jump ahead out of there, and we'll see if Lawrence ever live up to the hype. Now, Pete Carroll, at 70 years old, does he have anything left? Are the Raiders making a right choice here? They've kind of torn everything down. New quarterback, new general manager. Mark Davis, a lot of guys I talk to say he's a wildfire. Nobody knows what he's going to do. So Pete Carroll coming there, is that going to bring some stability to the Raiders?
I think it's definitely going to bring stability he's a winning, proven head coach over the past couple of years as a college coach and an NFL coach. One of the only guys to ever do that. I think it's really good for the short term now to try and rattle off some wins, but for the long term, obviously, it's not going to be a great solution because he is, however, it's 70 years old. You said, I think, and so it's like I said, it's not going to be great for the long run, but for now, I think it was one of the best options on the board. So I think they did a good job this offseason.
Yeah, and I thought that was that's a good pick for them, and we'll see if that works out. So and we talked about all these. So Ben Johnson with Chicago, you have Aaron Glenn with the Jets, you have Mike Vrabel with the Patriots. We talked about Cohen. We talked about Carroll. Kellen Moore. We'll see how he does with the Saints, and then you have Brian Schottenheimer. So those are the new head coaches going into the season. As we know, you're going to have 6 or 7 new coaches every year. So we'll see on that. In terms of teams losing the Super Bowl, I wanted to talk about that here on Lloyd Vance Insider Football on 102.9 The Game, Coast Sports Denver. Um, you have the Chiefs lose, and then looking at past losers Super Bowl. You know, the Niners. You saw they struggled this past season. The Eagles lost in 2022. They did make the playoffs, but lost in a wild card round to the Tampa Bay Bucks. You had the Bengals lose the Super Bowl, and then they made the playoffs again, but then they lost to Kansas City in the conference title game. And then you have the Chiefs in 2020. They lost, and then they made the playoffs and lost to Cincinnati 27-24. So are the Chiefs going to be able to jump back in it, or is this trend of Super Bowl losers having a tough season going to continue?
I think they're going to be right at the top like they always are. Hopefully, it stays true and they don't make it back to the Super Bowl this year, so we can finally watch someone else in the Super Bowl, like maybe the Bills or even the Ravens or the Bengals or the Texans, just anybody besides them. But I still think they're going to be a good team. I think we should still expect to see them in the AFC Championship or the Super Bowl. So yeah, I don't think they're going anywhere.
Yeah, that's going to be interesting because look, Andy Reid, he's closing in on a guy, on Bill Belichick in terms of his career victories. Andy Reid is moving quickly up the board, and yeah, I think they will have a bounce back season. They're going to need some health at the receiver position that they didn't have last year, and then the defense. They have Cole Aftis, but they need some more other guys and other than Chris Jones as well. So, but I do think the Chiefs will be in the mix. And when you look at the AFC West, that's a division. They've just dominated that division year after year. So I think that the Chiefs will win that one. Speaking of head coaches that Andy Reid is chasing, wanted to get Nate's take on this. Belichick is dating a girl that's almost your age. You talk about player, you know, and it's a mess because I hear he didn't or didn't put her on his staff at UNC. Give me your take on Belichick. Is this a mess? What are you thinking?
Yeah, props to him. Any guy that's that old and has a girlfriend that young, props to him. So, but he it definitely is a mess. She has too much control over him. You see that a lot with these older guys and these younger girls that they like to control him, or they're gold diggers. And I don't necessarily think that she's a gold digger. I think she's just using him though to promote her platform and maybe do something with her life. So I don't necessarily think it's a good situation right now. And I think the people around him should be telling him that, look, you need to get out of this before this gets even more serious than it already is.
I love Nate coming on. He doesn't hold back, man. He brings it, and that's the younger generation. I like, and he's correct. Belichick is just a head scratcher, but hey, more power to him. I would say don't try to put her within the organization at North Carolina. Yes, North Carolina has given him a lot of leeway, and I think a big thing a lot of people ask me is, do you think he'll ever come back to NFL? It's looking like at this point he's not going to be back in the NFL at his age. That means he's probably not going to catch Don Shula in terms of the record. I think he's about 14 wins shy of breaking that record for all time wins. And then, as we talked about earlier, Andy Reid, is quickly moving up the wins board, and the Chiefs will be back year after year. They're in the playoffs, they're in the Super Bowl, and I just think, okay, Belichick, you're kind of tarnishing your legacy, but we'll see how that goes from there. Uh, as we wind down here on Lloyd Vance's Insider Football, let's quickly look at a couple games. I know it's early, but Week 1, Nate, what's your the Eagles are a heavy favorite over the Dallas Cowboys. Do you think that should stay that way going into training camp? Eagles, Cowboys.
Yeah, I think the Eagles should be at least what is the line? 7.5. I think they should be
Yeah.
at least 10-point favorites in this game. I think they should easily clear the Cowboys. I don't think the Cowboys have the talent to compete with the Eagles, and yeah, I think the Eagles are gonna wipe the floor with them.
Yeah. Yeah, and I agree with you. I think the Eagles and their fans are gonna be real happy raising that banner, and you're going to see Lincoln Financial Field rocking. But we have a lot more days to talk about it. We're 90 some days away from that opener here in Philadelphia, Thursday night, September 4th, and then you come right back Friday, September 5th. You have the game in Brazil. That's on YouTube. It's Kansas City and the Chargers. So another great week here on Lloyd Vance's Insider Football. Glad that we were able to get back on track. I was glad that Nate was able to pinch hit for Kevin Midgette. Uh, and we appreciate our listeners, and we'll have a lot more show content. We get some good guests back on, our NFL insiders around the league. So thanks for joining us for another week, and we'll talk to you later on here on the Coast Sports Network and 1029 The Game.